They erased it from the books, silenced it in the media, but not here. Welcome to Tales of Black, the stories you were never supposed to see.
What happens when the first Black Republic is punished? Not for a crime, but for the audacious act of just being free. It's a question that really cuts to the core of how history gets written, doesn't it? And it's this profound enigma we're about to unpack in this deep dive. You see, the Haitian Revolution, and this is key, the only successful slave revolt in history that actually led to founding a sovereign nation, is often, shockingly absent. Or maybe at best, it's distorted, minimized in so many Western historical narratives. The question isn't just why it's overlooked, but maybe more importantly, how it was actively, deliberately silenced.
Oh, it's definitely far more than just an oversight. What we found looking through this fascinating stack of sources we have, from really meticulously detailed historical accounts to sharp economic analyses and some profound philosophical critiques, it all points to an active, almost relentless campaign of erasure. So for this deep dive, our mission isn't simply to recount what happened in Haiti, though we'll do that. It's to critically examine why. Why was its story so fiercely suppressed? And what does that suppression fundamentally mean for how we understand power, race, and, frankly, the true cost of freedom in the world today?
Absolutely. And our journey into these sources, it's really designed to illuminate the sheer scale of what Haiti achieved, the colossal entrenched forces it was up against, and then, maybe most importantly, the very deliberate systematic mechanisms that were deployed to literally, excise its significance from our collective memory. We'll trace the profound, long-lasting consequences of that erasure, connecting the dots, all the way from the early 19th century right up to the present day. This isn't just history class revisited. It feels like an urgent uncovering of a hidden truth. A truth that challenges some core assumptions about global power, about racial injustice, and maybe even the definition of freedom itself. Let's really dig into this.
Yeah, let's do that. Because to truly grasp the monumental significance of the Haitian Revolution, you first have to understand the powerhouse that was Saint-Domingue. That's the French colony, present-day Haiti. In the 18th century, this wasn't just some distant territory. It was, quite literally, the undisputed crown jewel of the French Empire. It earned its moniker, the Pearl of the Antilles, for a very good reason. Its economic importance was, it's hard to overstate.
Beyond staggering feels like the right phrase. Our sources show that Saint-Domingue alone accounted for an astonishing 2/3 of France's entire overseas trade.
2/3? Just think about that.
Yeah, just let that sink in. One single colony, roughly the size of Maryland, maybe Belgium, was the primary engine driving such a massive portion of a global superpower's economy. It directly employed this huge merchant fleet, we're talking over 1,000 ships, and it required the labor of 15,000 French sailors just to ferry its goods across the Atlantic. This wasn't some footnote. It was the absolute beating heart, the essential engine room of French prosperity at the time.
Exactly. And that prosperity, it wasn't just abstract wealth sitting in ledgers in Paris. It directly fueled the explosive growth and the, frankly, immense opulence of major French port cities. You think of places like Bordeaux, Nantes, Marseille.
Right.
Their very existence, their bustling markets, their burgeoning industries, their whole urban fabric depended massively on the agricultural bounty flooding in from this one colony. By 1789, it's estimated that the basic well-being, maybe even the direct survival of over 1 million French citizens, out of maybe 25 million total, were intrinsically tied to imports from Saint-Domingue.
1 million people directly.
Directly. And millions more indirectly, relied on that trade to maintain their standard of living. This colony truly represented the core of France's global economic power.
But this extraordinary wealth, this pearl, it was all built on a machine of just unimaginable brutality. This wasn't just your average plantation system. It was a coldly calculated, hyper-efficient apparatus designed for human suffering. The main exports, sugar, coffee, indigo, they demanded relentless, brutal labor. Sugar production especially was notoriously labor-intensive. It needed not only a massive enslaved workforce, but also these sophisticated irrigation systems, which, actually, our sources point out, French engineers meticulously constructed starting in the 1730s. And that workforce, exclusively enslaved Africans, violently trafficked across the Atlantic.
And the conditions in Saint-Domingue were just marked by extreme systemic violence and truly horrific mortality rates. For newly arrived enslaved Africans, the reality was terrifying and often fatal. Due to rampant diseases like malaria, yellow fever, combined with the utterly brutal working conditions, well, this statistic just stands out. At least 50% of them died within their very first year.
Half within a year.
Half. Our sources show that the plantation owners, operating with this chillingly cold economic logic, found it more profitable to literally work enslaved people to death.
Cheaper to replace than sustain.
Exactly. Cheaper to replace them with new arrivals than to invest in even minimal living conditions to, keep them alive longer. They weren't treated as human beings. They were disposable assets, expendable cogs in this relentless profit machine.
It's just an absolutely chilling thought, isn't it? Reducing human life to a disposable cog. And beyond the sheer physical demands, the diseases, you had systemic abuse is just rampant. We're talking chronic, severe malnourishment, housing that was barely shelter, and widespread, horrific sexual violence, especially against enslaved women. This wasn't just neglect. It feels like a deliberate, systematic dehumanization, all designed to maximize output, crush resistance. This entire society was, as the accounts describe it, a literal powder keg, just simmering.
Absolutely a powder keg. And that's precisely why the eventual loss of Saint-Domingue was, for France, not just an economic blow. It was fundamentally unimaginable and unforgivable. The colony's extreme wealth, built so brutally on such extreme human suffering, meant its very existence was intertwined with this profound, undeniable crime against humanity.
They couldn't admit it.
They couldn't afford to lose it, not just in revenue terms, but ideologically. Think about it. Acknowledging Haiti's success, acknowledging that these people could throw off the yoke and declare universal freedom, well, that would mean admitting that the very foundation of 18th century French prosperity, its global standing, was built on a grotesque crime. And that was a truth just far too costly, far too inconvenient for them to ever publicly acknowledge or reconcile with.
And that deep-seated refusal, that inability to face the truth, that's what really sets the stage for the extreme measures France would later take to punish Haiti, to systematically suppress its real story. So you have this powder keg, this brutal machine just ready to explode, and then the spark. On the night of August 21st, leading into the 22nd, 1791, the fire truly rose across the northern province, the economic heartland.
Right.
And this wasn't some spontaneous riot, was it? The sources are really clear on this.
No, not at all. It was a meticulously coordinated attack.
Yeah.
Thousands of enslaved people, synchronized, planned, and utterly devastating in its impact. The initial violence that night was this direct, visceral outpouring of generations of rage, suffering, defiance. Plantation owners, the symbols of oppression, were killed. And then the symbols of wealth built on their backs. The vast sugarcane fields, the imposing plantation buildings, they were set ablaze. Imagine that sight, casting this ominous glow across the sky. It was a deliberate assault on the entire system. And what began that night would spiral into this protracted, brutal war. It stretched for an astonishing 12 years, 4 months, 1 week, and 4 days. August 1791 to January 1st, 1804. This wasn't just a revolt, it was a full-scale revolution, a war for liberation.
And it's absolutely crucial, isn't it, to get past the simplistic black versus white narrative, because it's often presented that way, but it was so much more complex.
Oh, incredibly complex. A multi-sided conflict, constantly shifting alliances, deep internal divisions, a real bewildering array of motivations. You really have to break it down.
Okay, let's do that. Who are the main players?
Well, first, obviously, the enslaved Africans, the primary revolutionary force. Their goals weren't static, they evolved. Initially, maybe some sought better conditions, but it quickly escalated to demanding complete unconditional freedom, and then ultimately full national independence from France. And their spiritual practices, especially Vodou, became this incredibly powerful unifying force. It provided networks, a shared belief system, strategic insight even.
Okay, so the enslaved majority.
Yeah.
Then who else?
Then you had the free people of color, also known as the affranchised or mulattoes. They were in a really precarious, often contradictory position. Many of them actually owned slaves themselves, held significant property, had influence. Initially, their main goal wasn't abolishing slavery across the board, but gaining full citizenship and equal rights with the white colonists.
So they wanted equality within the system, not necessarily to overthrow it initially.
Exactly. Their leader, Vincent Vauget, led a revolt in 1790. Famously, it failed partly because he explicitly refused to seek support from the enslaved population. That really highlights their complex position. Their fight was for their rights within the existing framework.
Okay. And the white colonists.
They were deeply fractured, too. You had the Grand Blancs, the wealthy aristocratic plantation owners. They wanted more autonomy from France, but definitely wanted to keep the slave system. And then the Petit Blanc, poorer white folks, laborers, artisans, they often resented both the rich planters and the free people of color, fearing any challenge to their own status. And these two white groups were split again, royalists supporting the old monarchy versus revolutionaries aligned with the new French Republic. These internal fights critically weakened their ability to suppress the uprising. They were busy fighting each other, too.
Wow. So internal divisions everywhere.
Yeah.
And then external powers got involved.
Oh, yes. Foreign powers couldn't resist sticking their oar in. Spain, controlling the eastern side of the island, and Great Britain, France's big rival, both intervened. Surprisingly, even Polish forces ended up fighting there as part of Napoleon's French army. They'd been sent hoping for Polish independence in return, a whole other tragic story. But Britain and Spain were pursuing their own imperial interests, trying to gain from France's turmoil. Initially, both actually supported the enslaved rebels, even leaders like Toussaint Louverture, to undermine France.
Opportunistic alliances.
Completely. But they quickly became enemies of the revolution once the true goal completely chief. Black freedom and independence became clear. That wasn't in their interests either.
Understanding all this complexity, this shifting web of alliances and betrayals, it really does highlight the genius of leaders like Toussaint Louverture, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Navigating that treacherous landscape, playing powers off against each other, shifting alliances with such strategic insight, it was extraordinary. It shows the Haitian Revolution was far more politically sophisticated than the sort of primitive uprising narrative it sometimes gets reduced to.
So this incredibly complex war finally reaches its climax after Toussaint's capture.
Right. The fight continued under his generals, especially Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and when it became undeniable that Napoleon wasn't just restoring French control, but fully intended to bring back slavery, the resistance hit fever pitch. The decisive battle was Vertières, November 1803, a crushing final defeat for the elite French army under General Rochambeau. They were decimated not just by Haitian forces, but also by yellow fever, which ravaged the European troops.
And that victory led directly to the Declaration.
It paved the way. On January 1st, 1804, in Gonaïves, Dessalines officially declared the colony's absolute independence, and he dramatically renamed it Haiti. Choosing that name from the indigenous Taino or Arawak word Haiti, meaning land of high mountains, was such a powerful, deliberate severing of ties with the French colonial past, reclaiming an older identity.
It's such a globally significant moment, the second independent nation in the Americas, after the U.S.
But unique, the only nation founded from a successful slave revolt, the first non-white ruled state in the Americas, and the very first to permanently abolish slavery, putting universal freedom right into its constitution. A radical act on the world stage.
Truly world-altering.
Yeah.
But we also have to address the violence that followed independence, the killing of the remaining white French citizens.
Yes, it's a difficult but necessary part of the story. After declaring independence, Dessalines, who later crowned himself Emperor Jacques I, ordered the killing of most remaining white French people on the island. Sources estimate somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 were killed between February and April 1804.
How do we understand that?
Well, it has to be seen in the terrifying context of preventing French reoccupation and re-enslavement. Napoleon's intentions were crystal clear. It was arguably a brutal measure born of fear and the determination to secure their hard-won freedom permanently. However, regardless of the motivation, this act was immediately seized upon and weaponized by Haiti's enemies globally. They used it to paint the new nation as inherently barbaric, savage, dangerous.
A justification for isolating them.
Precisely. It became a powerful narrative tool to justify the international isolation, the diplomatic snubs, the economic punishment that followed. It was used against their very independence from the start.
Okay, let's turn back to Toussaint Louverture. You really can't discuss this revolution without delving into him. He's such a central and complex figure.
Absolutely central. Born into slavery around 1743, François-Dominique Toussaint. His early life was unusual. His father, an educated African captive, taught him. Toussaint learned to read and write French, exceptionally rare and empowering for an enslaved person then. He had varied roles. Herdsman, traditional herbal healer, giving him deep knowledge of local plants, coachman, eventually steward. These roles gave him this intimate understanding of both white society and the black population, plus unmatched knowledge of the terrain.
And he wasn't enslaved his whole life.
No, that's a key complexity. He gained legal freedom in 1776. And perhaps surprisingly, for a time, he owned a small property and even owned enslaved people himself.
Wow. That really complicates the simple liberator image.
It absolutely does. It forces us to grapple with the nuances of that society. When the 1791 rebellion broke out, Toussaint was nearly 50. He didn't join immediately, but he saw its potential. He joined the rebels, rose rapidly from army physician, using his healer knowledge, perhaps become a top leader due to sheer military and political skill. His declaration from Camp Tourelle in August 93 is powerful. Brothers and friends, I am Toussaint Louverture. I have undertaken vengeance. Clear resolve.
And understanding him means getting past simple labels, right? He seems full of contradictions.
Deeply complex, yes. Contradictory, even. For instance, he was a devout Roman Catholic, yet he led an army inspired and often unified by Vodou practices, which he himself opposed. His 1801 constitution actually established Catholicism as the state religion. That blend, that conflict of ideologies within him is fascinating.
And his stance on labor after gaining power, that's another major point of complexity.
Perhaps the most perplexing part. He understood the plantation economy was vital for survival. So, after taking control, he controversially reestablished a system of forced labor, compelling formerly enslaved people back to the plantations to revive the economy.
Forced labor after leading a slave revolution, that's jarring.
It is. It was a kind of military-regulated labor system. And it created, understandably, this unbridgeable gap with the rural population who'd fought for absolute freedom and wanted their own land. It caused huge discontent, even rebellion against his policies later on.
Yet despite all that, he was this master diplomat and strategist.
Undeniably, his genius was playing the European powers against each other, allied with Spain against France initially. Then, when France abolished slavery in 94, boom. He switches sides, joins the French, becomes a general, drives out the Spanish, hammers the British, forces their withdrawal, all while secretly keeping lines open to the U.S. government, subtly undermining French control. Masterful maneuvering.
So a Catholic leading a Vodou army, a liberator imposing forced labor, a former slave who owned slaves. You can see why he becomes unnarratable in simple Western terms.
Exactly. He didn't fit the mold. He resisted easy reduction into a pure symbol of freedom fighter in the European Enlightenment sense. So it was easier for Western narratives to ignore him, dismiss him, or character him as a tyrant, which racist accounts certainly did. He just didn't fit their script.
By 1801, he's basically the ruler of the whole island.
De facto ruler of Hispaniola, yes. Issues an autonomous constitution, names himself governor general for life, still nominally under France, but it's a clear declaration of self-governance. And this seriously alarmed Napoleon Bonaparte,
who was consolidating power and wanted that colony back under firm control and, crucially, with slavery restored.
Precisely. Napoleon's response was massive. 1802, he sends this huge expedition, maybe 20,000 elite troops, under his brother-in-law, General Leclerc. Explicit mission: restore French authority, restore slavery.
And Toussaint fought back.
Fiercely. Months of brutal fighting. The French suffered staggering losses, yellow fever again playing a huge role alongside Haitian resistance. But Leclerc eventually wore down Toussaint's forces, faced desertions. Seeking peace, Toussaint agreed to a meeting in June 1802. Lured under false promises of safety, a classic betrayal. He was captured, basically kidnapped.
And exiled.
Cruelly exiled to Fort Joux, a cold, damp, isolated prison high in the French mountains, a world away from Haiti. Subjected to constant interrogation, harsh conditions, he wrote this incredible 16,000-word memoir there. Not a life story, but a desperate plea for a public trial, a chance to defend his honor, explain his actions.
Did he get it?
Never. He died there alone. Pneumonia, malnutrition. April 7, 1803. Just months before Haiti finally declared independence. His death in that French prison became this bitter symbol of Europe, betraying its own supposed ideals of liberty.
So his legacy, it's immense, but complicated. Father the nation, yet didn't see independence.
Right. Celebrated as a father, alongside Dessalines. His example definitely inspired liberation movements elsewhere in the Americas, inspired abolitionists. But criticisms remain. The brutality of some campaigns, especially the purge of his mulatto rival André Rigaud, carried out by Dessalines under his orders, that created this deep division that plagued Haiti for years.
He remains this paradox: cautious, revolutionary, benevolent dictator, liberator imposing forced labor.
Exactly. And that complexity, while fascinating, made him hard to fit into simple, heroic narratives, which definitely contributed to his marginalization in Western history books.
What's truly, infuriating when you dig into this is how the silencing wasn't just passive forgetting. It was actively enforced. Political, economic actions.
Absolutely. After independence, Haiti faced this hostile, terrified world. Western powers, led by France and the U.S., launched this coordinated, decades-long campaign. Isolate, punish, economically strangle the new nation. And the most brutal, ingenious, and lasting tool in that campaign, the infamous 1825 indemnity.
Before we get to the indemnity, the initial reaction was fear, right?
Pure fear. Shockwaves across slaveholding societies. Plantation owners from Brazil to the U.S. South were terrified. Haiti's example would ignite similar uprisings among their own enslaved people. So immediate boycotts by European powers and their Caribbean colonies, crippling diplomatic and economic isolation from day one.
And the U.S., a nation founded on liberty, but
led by slave owners like Jefferson, they reacted with hostility, cut aid, pursued isolation, feared the contagion of black freedom spreading south. The U.S. didn't even formally recognize Haiti until 1862. During the Civil War, think about that. Decades of deliberate non-recognition. This isolation starved Haiti of trade, investment, legitimacy right from the start.
Okay, so that sets the stage for the indemnity. France comes back.
Comes back with warships. July 1825, 21 years after Haiti declared independence. King Charles II sends a fleet, 14 warships, 528 cannons right into Port-au-Prince harbor. The ultimatum was chilling. Pay 150 million francs as indemnity to former French planters or face a new war and likely re-enslavement.
Indemnity for what? Lost land?
Yeah.
Buildings?
Yes, but primarily for the people. Compensation for their lost property, which explicitly included the formerly enslaved human beings who had freed themselves.
Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I heard that right. They actually build them for their own freedom.
Exactly that. It's almost unbelievable, but it's true. The legal basis was France's old Code Noir, the 17th century Black Code. This monstrous legal framework defined enslaved people as chattel, as personal property, no rights, no personhood. It was this fiction that allowed France to demand a ransom for the very people who had liberated themselves from that system. Faced with those cannons, Haiti's President Boye, he had no real choice. July 11, 1825, they signed. It wasn't a treaty. It was extortion under threat of violence, a ransom for independence.
150 million francs. How much was that in real terms back then?
Astronomical. 10 times Haiti's annual revenue at the time, according to estimates. Impossible to pay. So to make just the first payment, Haiti was immediately forced to borrow 30 million francs from French banks, including the Rothschilds, at exorbitant interest rates and fees, of course.
Creating the double debt.
Precisely. The double debt.
If this touched something in you, subscribe, comment, and share it forward. You're not just watching, you're part of this legacy.
Owed the French government for the indemnity, and owed French banks for the loans to pay the indemnity. A perfectly designed debt trap. Even when it was renegotiated down to 90 million francs in 1838 after another show of French naval force, the burden was still crushing. Paying 2 creditors for the right to exist free.
This wasn't just punishment, was it? It feels like a calculated strategy.
Oh, it was absolutely a sophisticated and frankly wicked geopolitical strategy. Our sources break down the objectives. First, financial incapacitation. Burden Haiti with impossible debt, ensure it never becomes a prosperous, inspiring example for others still enslaved, keep them poor.
Keep the revolution contained financially.
Exactly. Second, re-legitimize slavery. Force Haiti to pay for freedom, internationally reasserting the legitimacy of owning humans. Self-liberation creates a debt. A chilling message. Third, neo-colonialism through finance. Forced loans turned Haiti into a dependent debtor nation, a risk-free profit source for French banks. Economic chains replaced political ones?
No need for governors when you have bankers collecting interest.
Right. And finally, and maybe most cruelly, perpetual instability. Drain the treasury for a century, ensure poverty, ensure lack of development. Then racist observers can point to Haiti's struggles as proof of Black incapacity for self-governance.
A self-fulfilling prophecy engineered by the debt itself.
A grotesque self-fulfilling prophecy. So the debt wasn't just a bill, it was a tool to rewrite the revolution's story from heroic success to inevitable failure, silencing the truth of that initial victory.
The economic cost. It's hard to fathom. They finally finished paying.
1947, 122 years after it was imposed. Imagine that burden, generation after generation. For long periods, up to 80% of Haiti's national budget went directly to French debt repayment.
80%? What does that leave for? Anything else? Schools, hospitals, roads.
Almost nothing. It crippled the state's ability to invest in anything critical. Education, healthcare, agriculture, infrastructure. This is the fundamental root cause of Haiti's chronic underdevelopment and poverty. It's a direct line from 1825. That New York Times investigation, the ransom, calculated the direct payments at around $560 million in today's money. But the real cost...
The lost opportunity cost.
Exactly, the lost economic growth. The investigation estimated that if Haiti had kept and invested that money, it could have generated anywhere from $21 billion to maybe $115 billion in wealth for the nation by today.
That wealth didn't just vanish. It went somewhere.
It went to France. It enriched French banks, particularly the Rothschilds. Some accounts suggest it even helped finance things like the Eiffel Tower, a direct transfer of wealth from the world's first free black republic to its former enslavers, shaping both their destinies for generations.
To really drive home how unique Haiti was, and maybe why the response was so uniquely brutal, it helps to compare it to other major slave revolts, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. The comparison highlights Haiti's radical exceptionalism. Let's take Spartacus, maybe the most famous, 73-71 BCE, Roman Republic. Huge revolt, 120,000 people.
Big initial successes caused panic.
Right, but ultimately crushed. Brutally. Spartacus killed, thousands crucified. His story becomes the symbol of heroic failure. Noble struggle, but the system wins. Because it failed, it became safe to tell, even romanticized later. It posed no lasting threat to the idea that the system was invincible.
Okay. What about something closer in time, like Tacky's War in Jamaica, 1760s?
Tacky's War. Significant Aiken revolt caused real damage, real panic among British planters, but it was suppressed by British forces, crucially, with help from Jamaican Maroons, free black communities who'd escaped slavery earlier and made treaties.
The divide and conquer tactic.
Classic colonial strategy. So Tacky's War was contained. It led to some punitive measures, but didn't overthrow the system. It was managed.
And Nat Turner's Rebellion in the U.S., 1831.
Much smaller, only about 75 people, lasted 2 days. Swiftly, brutally suppressed. Executions, retaliatory massacres of innocent black people. The main outcome. Not freedom, but even harsher slave codes. Prohibiting education, travel, assembly. Tightening the chains further. Like Spartacus, it became a tragedy, a warning against resistance. Futile against state power.
So failure or containment seems to be the pattern. What about the Maroons themselves? They did achieve a form of freedom.
They did, through incredible guerrilla warfare, establishing autonomous communities in remote areas, especially in Jamaica. But their success was partial and came at a cost. Peace treaties, like the one in 1739, granted them freedom and land. But the price. They had to act as colonial militias, hunting down newly enslaved slaves and returning them to owners.
So they were integrated into the colonial power structure.
Exactly. They became enforcers for the system they originally fought against. Their resistance was managed, co-opted, contained. It didn't dismantle the broader system.
And this is where Haiti stands apart.
Completely apart. Haiti did not fail like Spartacus or Turner. And it was not integrated or co-opted like the Maroons. It completely destroyed the colonial system within its borders, established an alternative state model based on universal freedom, defied every racial and imperial assumption of the age.
It offered no comforting lessons for slave powers. Couldn't be romanticized as tragedy, couldn't be managed as an exception.
Precisely. It was a paradigm shift. A living, breathing, terrifying example of successful self-liberation. And that's why the international response was qualitatively different. Military suppression had failed, so it became this long-term project. Political isolation, economic strangulation, designed not just to punish, but to destroy the model and erase it from history.
So bringing this all together, the conclusion seems inescapable, doesn't it? This wasn't just forgetting, this was active silencing.
Active and systematic silencing. That's the uncomfortable but vital truth our deep dive lays bare. Not an accident. A conscious, multi-pronged strategy. Intellectual avoidance, racist historiography, demonizing leaders, geopolitical isolation, and most brutally, economic warfare via the indemnity. And connecting these historical dots is absolutely crucial to understanding Haiti's situation today, its ongoing struggle.
The causal chain feels undeniable. Extraordinary revolutionary success, radical universal freedom. That was unthinkable to the Western worldview then.
Right.
This ideological threat leads directly to silencing, isolation, formalized by the 1825 indemnity. That act of extortion causes over a century of underdevelopment, bleeding the nation dry. And that historical theft is the root of today's poverty, instability, vulnerability. The past isn't past in Haiti. It's a crushing weight on the present.
And that economic domination, that pattern of external control, it didn't stop with France. The U.S. occupation, 1915 to 1934, American banks like National City Bank, forerunner of Citigroup, taking over Haiti's debts, controlling its finances.
Another layer of dependence.
A direct continuation. Siphoning off maybe a quarter of Haiti's revenue to New York banks, while public health, education for Haitians suffered terribly. This pattern, rooted in the original debt, kept Haiti in economic bondage.
But this hidden history, this profoundly uncomfortable truth, it is coming more into the light now, isn't it?
Yes, thankfully. There's been a powerful, renewed interest, rigorous scholarly work, investigative journalism, especially that New York Times ransom series meticulously detailing the theft. And this exposure has, quite rightly, reignited the crucial debate about reparations.
Which isn't a new demand from Haiti itself.
Not at all. It has deep roots. Back in 2003, on the 200th anniversary of Toussaint's death, President Jean-Bertrand Aristide courageously made a formal request. France should repay Haiti $21.7 billion, a figure matching modern estimates of the damages.
And France's response.
Flat rejection of financial responsibility. They acknowledged only a vague moral debt. And then, tellingly, just a year later, 2004, Aristide's democratically elected government was overthrown in a coup with French and U.S. backing.
And the reparations demand was dropped by the new government.
Promptly abandoned. It illustrates, in the starkest terms, continued external interference to silence Haitian voices calling for justice and accountability. The pattern persists.
So let's just reiterate the core premise here. The Haitian Revolution wasn't passively forgotten. It was actively, deliberately, systematically erased.
Erased, punished, neutralized. It was a conscious strategy because the example was too radical, too dangerous for a world order built on slavery and colonialism.
And the struggle to make this history known, to have its consequences addressed through actions like reparations,
Yeah.
that feels like the final, unfinished chapter of the revolution itself.
It absolutely is a vital, ongoing fight for full recognition of its meaning, its legacy, and the true sovereignty of the Haitian people. Awakening these ashes, bringing the silenced truth into the light. It's essential, not just for Haiti's healing, but for all of us to confront how power shapes what we know and what we choose to forget about the past, and what that means for global justice, for our understanding of freedom right now, today.
As you reflect on this deep dive, this really extraordinary story of Haiti, I really hope you consider the broader implications. How history gets constructed, how power shapes memory. What other unthinkable truths might be out there, hidden, waiting for their stories to be told? We really encourage you to continue your own exploration. Look into the work of scholars like Michel Rolfe Troyot. Check out that recent investigative journalism on Haiti's debt. It's powerful stuff. Thank you for joining us on this vital journey into a silenced but profoundly impactful piece of global history.
If this touched something in you, subscribe, comment, and share it forward. You're not just watching, you're part of this legacy. This story isn't over. Subscribe to carry it forward.